I want to make people sick. And what I do here is the virus is not necessarily the bug. The virus is what I put over the internet. Let me show you how I can crash a system pretty easily. I affect key individuals here, here, and here. And then I take another community in the back of the room. I affect key individuals there. And then I take another community. I affect key individuals there. And what I tell you it's going to do is it's going to produce paranoia, anxiety, and sleeplessness. What I've just done is I've recruited every paranoid hypochondriac to think that they have whatever that is. I've used salient and sentinel cases, and I create essentially a legion of what's known as the worried well. They now flood emergency rooms. They flood their clinicians. The CDC responds back.
Listen to Agent Smith from the Deep State describe the plandemic in horrific detail. This video is from 2017. Inside a secret government facility. This is what government agents talk about behind closed doors. They're worse than Dr. Evil. They're monsters. And what you're about to hear in this broadcast is going to terrify you in ways you've never been terrified before. Not only are they going to talk about rolling out the plandemic and using the psychosis against people, but they're going to be talking about assassinating people with nanotechnology, directed energy weapons. It's going to blow your mind.
It's both a short and a long Moore's effect. Moreover, I can create particular neuromicrobiologicals that may have a much longer duration of action. For example, modified Zika virus. And what I can then do is, as a consequence of that, is I can affect subsequent generations to incur a public health morbidity and mortality effect that then creates an increased economic and perhaps social burden. Long war scenario. If I wanted to do something that's a little bit more proximate, I can utilize nanoparticulate matter. Now, we can utilize nanoscience to create much better drugs, to get them where they got to go in the brain. I can create nanoscience and nanotechnology to be able to escort certain drugs across the proliferant barrier, which is the blood-brain barrier and cerebrospinal fluid barrier. So I get these things where they got to go. But I can also utilize nanoparticulate matter in a very indiscriminate way. The idea here is that I can get something called high CNS aggregation material that is essentially invisible to the naked eye and even to most scanners because it is so small that it selectively goes through most levels of filter porosity. These are then inhaled either through the nasal mucosa or absorbed through the oral mucosa. They have high CNS affinity. They clump in the brain or in the vasculature, and they create essentially what looks like a hemorrhagic diathesis, in other words, a hemorrhage predisposition or a clot predisposition in the brain. What I've done is I've created a stroking agent.
What Agent Smith has done here is talk about deploying invisible weapons, silent weapons to cause strokes. And what you'll discover soon is heart attacks. They're attacking the hearts and minds of the American people and of dissidents. They're releasing all sorts of nanotoxins to make people sick. Invisible weapons. This is what they specialize in. And not only are they using chemicals and biologicals, but also energy weapons. You're about to discover how deep this rabbit hole goes, but it's beyond insanity. It's beyond Dr. Evil.
We can also utilize these interventional technologies in those ways that may able to directly affect the brain. Probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain. Really, one of the things we can also do is transcranial neuromodulation, the idea of going through the skull to modulate the node and network activity of the brain, to optimize the performance of key individuals in certain tasks and performances that are relatively to their missional space. And we can also do that against hostile or perhaps belligerent others. We can go further to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious, in a very good sense, is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program.
And so they're deploying energy weapons as well to target people. This is why they've been making fun of things like the tinfoil hat. Endless propaganda, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories. Why? Because if people start protecting their brains, their weapons become less effective, perhaps even ineffective. We have this convergence of psychological operations plus top secret invisible weapons working against people in ways you can't even imagine. DARPA's deployed so many different types of nasty weapons of this nature that it should terrify you. Neural networks deployed on the nanoscale. What do you think's in these vaccines? All of this graphene and these nanobots. But also energy weapons that target the brain, that kill people while they sleep, like a sniper attack coming in from cell towers, coming in from other relay stations. Not only that, but they are targeting individuals with neural scenarios that essentially draw people into psychosis. Neural narratives is the name of the project. In fact, we'll be getting into more of that in a future broadcast, but here's even more information from this deep state agent.
One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. If you're not aware what nanoparticulate matter is, it's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 times 10 to the minus 9th. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. To auto-aggregate, to be able to aggregate in particular areas based upon their biological and or chemical sensitivity. But now we go one step further. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was announced that you could then aerosolize nanomaterials. And go one step further, I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space, and these can be weaponized. And they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. How much of this material would I need? Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you, or based upon where I come from, New York City, all yous. Look at this. Look at this. I'm carrying that material. Would you see it? Would I have to lug a giant weapon into the room? No, I wouldn't. And what if, in fact, I utilized some form of an unmanned aerial device or unmanned ground device as a delivery vehicle? Something like a drone or a bug. Could I do something with that?
Aerosolized nanotechnology. Smart dust. Nanorobots floating in the air, infecting people. In fact, they started talking about all sorts of different programs using bugs, mosquitoes, to inject people with nanotech. Once in the blood, it turns into a neural network, a neural web, a DARPA web inside the brain. And they're running neural narratives through this network to make people hear voices and think things and to listen and to watch what people are doing, turning people into a computer. You've heard of your webcam spying on you. Now your eyes and your ears and your brain is spying on you, sending it all to the NSA, sending it all to the DARPA. And so, what do you think's in these vaccines? Undoubtedly, we're talking about exactly this. We've seen the videos of the nano routers, of the antennas inside, floating inside the vaccines. This is a component of what's going on. It's a war on a nanoscale, and they've infected literally billions of people, assimilated them in a certain sense. And you might think this is impossible. This is way beyond modern technology, but it's supposedly not. And people that have been targeted by this technology in the run-up to the mass deployment will tell you that it is very convincing as well as traumatizing experiencing this technology. That's why we've been talking about the shielding, because this neuroscience, this next chapter in our lives, is being deployed on a massive scale. And so this is the new battlefield. It's invisible laser weapons targeting you from just about every direction, from a drone, from a satellite, from a weather balloon, from an airplane, from some kind of backhaul, fiber optic backhaul, 60 gigahertz microwave transmitter mounted on a lamppost somewhere. Even these new street lights, smart lights, are 5G enabled. In fact, when you look at these smart cities, you've got burst transmitters everywhere. And all of those can be used as a launch pad for an invisible attack, courtesy of DARPA and the deep state. That's why we've been talking about shielding. And of course, we're dealing with military-grade technology. You know, we were talking about the tinfoil hat. That really isn't.
We can also utilize these interventional technologies in those ways that may able to directly affect the brain. Probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally. And
directed energy weapons that target the physiology of the brain, the gray matter, the neurons, and the like. And so, you know, we've been talking about shielding. A tinfoil hat is just, you know, a rough description of what that shielding could look like, but it's mocked because they don't want you to use it. Oh, you're going to wear a bulletproof vest? Look how, you know, ugly that is. That's so gay. It's paranoia, right? Oh, he's going to wear a bulletproof vest to work, you know. And so they'll make fun of you. But essentially, this is the battlefield. This is exactly why you need to wear some type of helmet, because you won't even know why, and all of a sudden you got a headache, it's a stroke, it's over. They just hit you with some kind of satellite weapon. A lot of people are like, oh, satellites don't exist. And that's another argument altogether. You know, it could be a plane, it could be a weather balloon, but there's definitely attacks coming from above. And wearing an EMF helmet is going to become basically a prerequisite, especially if you're anti-government. If you don't want to be a slave to this beast system, then essentially you're going to have to protect yourself. It's a war. It's a cold war because citizens haven't made it a civil war. but it'll stay a Cold War. They can kill people all day with satellite weapons, airplane weapons, cell towers, smart dust, right? And these attacks are coming from all directions. You don't even know what's attacking you anymore. They can mount this stuff on cars. They can be tailgating you. And so you have to make covert EMF protection. It's a covert war. Everybody's like Jason Bourne out there now. The deep state's coming after you, whether you like it or not. And it's too late now. If you've ever been on, a website like InfoWars or posting anything on Facebook, you're already on that red list. Don't even think that you can comply now. They'll never believe it. You think people like that are going to believe you now? So you might as well start investing in shielding. And a helmet is a prerequisite. We recommend, taking a baseball cap and essentially making a skull cap out of whatever materials you can find, but probably 20 layers or so of thick aluminum foil works best, molded into a skull cap. But they can still, hit you in the temple, hit you from behind. It's a nuisance, to say the least. But they also attack the heart. We've been talking about the heart palpitations. These are coming from cell towers and other means. And it's probably a cocktail effect of spike protein from the vaccinated, as well as EMP bursts from the cell towers. But it's a war for hearts and minds. They're going to attack people's hearts and minds. They're going to give people heart attacks and strokes. Make it look like natural causes so that there's no attribution, as they like to put it. Right? No smoking gun, no proof, no evidence, no 911 to call. Nobody can hear you scream. Total nightmare. And so you're also going to have to invest in personal EMF armor and, in fact, make a safe room at home. And, you'll probably want to make it your bedroom because these people like to cook you while you sleep. Attacks are even coming from underground. They can rainbow ELF from one point on the ground to another. Attacks will come from underground. You'll even have to shield under your bed. We recommend sheet metal or Faraday shielding. Using aluminum foil to turn your safe room into a box doesn't work well. Creates a negative feedback loop, turns it into a microwave oven, if you will. So you're going to want to experiment with different types of shielding, but sheet metal and tight metal mesh works best, but sometimes, depending on your level of importance or activism, you're going to need multiple layers of shielding. And so these people love to give activists heart attacks and strokes and make it look like natural causes or irradiate them and essentially make it look like COVID. That's another strategy that they've rolled out. They've also deployed some type of airborne Alzheimer's biochemical agent. You've been hearing about it in the news, some mysterious neurodegenerative disorder that's affecting young people. A lot of people with the COVID are talking about memory issues. And so they're dumbing people down in a different way, making them confused, unable to think well, and essentially it adds to the fog of war. People can't figure out what's going on. They're trying everything. They're censoring people. They're taking people out. They're dumbing people down. They're making people sick. They're doing everything they can to essentially win this war against freedom and the American way. It's amazing to see these communists, socialists, liberals in action. But the deep state is renowned for being satanic. These people are hardcore satanic, not just a little bit, but essentially it's like the Temple of Set, the Church of, Satan, essentially all rolled into an agency. All of these agencies now are hardcore satanic. NSA, FBI, you name it. And so they're all into essentially destroying life, turning something into nothing. Their religion is about nothingness, empty space, dark matter, as well as molesting children and drinking blood. But that's besides the point. These people are monsters. And they'll use all of this technology against you. So they're rolling out these biochemical brain fog agents. If you've ever experienced the brain fog, that's because of what's in the air, what you're breathing in, as well as the electromagnetic waves that are being pumped in the air through the death towers and the Wi-Fi and the like. And it sounds, way out there, but you heard Agent Smith for himself. We recommend the NAC. It seems to counteract whatever they've deployed right now, cuts through the brain fog real well. It's an amino acid. You can look into it. It's not necessarily something that's synthetic and toxic, but just about everything has a side effect. So
one of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can...
The video guy. So get your NAC from your local, health store or whatever. Look into it. If you've been experiencing the brain fog, avoid other people's air, avoid breathing the air of public spaces. It's not necessarily COVID that you have to worry about. They could be deploying anything right now, including smart dust in your area. So you have to think about air filters. You have to think about real, efficient air filters eventually. And think about detoxing. How do you detox nanotech out of your body? That's, another story. But you probably want to think of like heavy metal detox solutions. We don't necessarily recommend magnets or whatever, because if it's anything like the graphene videos, that might cause a clump somewhere and a stroke. So some people have had, success using super magnets for the DARPA neural web that's invading people's brains right now. But that's why, every day that goes by,
utilize these interventional technologies in those...
Every day that goes by is a failure. Every day that goes by that people don't rise up and bring the guillotines and just start deploying justice on these satanic pedophiles. Every day that goes by is a failure, because they just deploy more and more horrific things. And, people are just hoping they can just go back to shopping, go back to normal, go back to watching the game and all of that stuff. But it's just a distraction. It's just a honey trap. Keep you busy. It's all there just to keep you busy, to mesmerize you, so that they can deploy more things to exterminate you. Because that's their religion. People wonder about the Agenda 21. They think it's depopulation. There's too many people. That's just a side story, an excuse. These people are literally into turning the world into a wasteland. They're anti-life. They're not just anti-children, pro-choice kind of thing. These people are literally anti-life. They want to cut every tree down. They want to burn every forest. They want to turn everything into a desert. They want to turn the planet into Mars. And for all we know, that's what happened to Mars. People like this. But that's why, marching around in circles really isn't going to help you or anyone at this stage. It's a war. And they're going to keep executing, genociding people no matter what. So you can hope that an election is going to change something or that they're going to wake up. They're not going to wake up. They're trying to exterminate you. Leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Feel free to mirror this content. Until the next time, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.